All right, welcome everybody. We'll get started with the presentation portion once everybody's able to find their seat. All right, we're good. Good evening. Happy spring. I'm Nick Ross, Director of Transportation Engineering for the City of Bozeman. You are here at our Fowler Avenue Connection 30% Design Public Engagement meeting. We have friends online who aren't able to join us in person today. And we're grateful for you all being able to make it out and feel the last bit of our Montana and engage with us on the next phase of the project. All right. So we're going to start with a little bit of a project background. So Fowler Avenue Connection is a missing gap of about 1.5 miles of Fowler Avenue on the west side of town. This is a major north-south transportation artery on the west side of Bozeman. It is termed a minor arterial as functional classification in our transportation system. It's currently discontinuous between Babcock and Oak. It's the overarching intent of the project here. And this part of town, as I'm sure many of you folks have witnessed and experienced yourself, is experiencing quite a bit of additional transportation demand, traffic demand. And we want to make sure we're always clear that that's not just cars, but also folks walking and biking as well. A little bit of the long-term planning history of this project. So this has been designated as a minor arterial in our transportation master plans dating back into the 90s. It's referenced in our latest transportation master plan of 2017 as project MSN 17. You know, you all have your copies handy. At that time, it was planned as a 5-lane arterial. I'll speak on behalf of staff and the city as being exceptionally grateful that when we went into the pre-design phase a couple years back, we had a large amount of community support to really right-size that down to 2, if not 3 lanes, as you'll see here tonight. So in terms of project approach, first of all, we used Fowler as sort of our first approach to new planning and transportation engagement paradigm in Bozeman. So previously, we used the transportation master plan phase, where we did most of our engagement. Once those projects were approved, we more or less went and started building. We wanted to take a step back on this one and really take our time to engage with the community to make sure we get it right. As we see right off the bat, 5 lanes down to 2, that's been a success so far. We did complete our pre-design phase. I'm happy to see many familiar faces in the crowd. 2 summers ago, took back a lot of great feedback and drastically altered our plan that you'll see tonight. So the overarching theory there is we're going to use sort of context-sensitive design. So it's not going to be just a straight road down the middle, 5 lanes, deal with it. We're really going to use different design features to mitigate as much of the impact of that road as possible on the environment and on our residents. And so here we are now. In design, 30%. This is sort of where we set the general line of the project, the grade, and then what the section of the road will look like. From there, we'll go into 60%, 90% review. You'll all be invited to have a similar conversation at that time as we're having tonight. And then we do plan to construct it by segment. So starting north, going south, Oak to Durston, Babcock, Babcock to Huffine, and then the intersection. So, okay, so a little bit of our project timeline. This was one of the boards we presented on your way in. So again, started the project way back feels like way back in 2021. Had about a 1.5 years worth of engagement in pre-design effort planning phase. Spent about the last 2 years in our early action design. That gets us to about 30% design phase. That's where we're at tonight. We're engaging right now through the beginning part of this spring, and hopefully have good groundwork to get our consultant, Sanderson Stewart, thanks for being in the room tonight with us, off to 60%, 90%, and target our first phase of construction in 2026. Okay, so starting back, and again, we really wanted to hammer home how much we did learn from the community in the pre-design phase, not only about the project, but also about the actual engagement itself. So on the left side, that was all of our engagement efforts at that pre-design phase. And on the bottom, we took some really good comments and feedback from this group and from you guys about what we could have done better. What we heard, a lot of folks didn't know the meetings were happening. That's a problem. You got to be here. You got to know that this meeting's happening in order for you to come and engage with us. We used what we call focus groups in the pre-design effort. They were sort of stakeholders like HOAs, and some folks that weren't invited to those meetings felt like they were left out. We certainly didn't want to do that, and so we nixed the focus groups this time. We had a great comment that, planning or community development, when there's a site plan or a subdivision going in, they put signs right there, so folks that are going past can see them and know that it's happening. We thought that was a great idea. And then we wanted to offer opportunity for you guys to engage with us in more of this formal setting. We heard that last time, and so that's what we're doing here tonight. So what we're changing, direct mailers, we sent more than 500 direct mailers to folks around the corridor. Hopefully all of you got those. Again, we're not going to do focus groups, any engagement, any conversations with the city. Any conversations with the city are going to be open to all. In the back. We did post signage up and down the Fowler corridor this time around. Hopefully you're able to see those as well. And then here tonight, we're going to have a Q&A section at the 30% design phase so we can have more of an open conversation. Okay, one of the big concerns that we heard at the pre-design phase was the environmental impact project. So we're including this slide as a reminder of what activities were done at that pre-design phase. We did three main efforts in our environmental investigation. One, wetland and water body assessment. Wanted to make sure that we're not impacting any wetlands. The project will not. A biological resource site. So this looks at mostly endangered or protected species and what impact the project might have on them. And then finally, hazardous material review, both for the workers building the project and any of the adjacent public that might be exposed to anything that's in the ground if and when we start digging that up. And so this ultimately ended up at a level of review that's consistent with NEPA in the Montana State version of a categorical exclusion. That level of design of environmental investigation was performed at the pre-design phase and will carry through into the design phase here. So at the conclusion of our pre-design phase, we ended up with essentially a list of demands on staff. So when all your public comment was heard by the Bozeman City Commission, they did approve the project to move forward, but under a certain set of conditions. One, minimum or maximum of one travel lane in each direction. That's the big one. Left turn lanes will be added or proposed to be added where they're required or necessary to help ease flow of travel and also safety. We're going to propose a traffic signal be installed at Babcock. That was one of the concerns we heard. We had initially proposed a roundabout. There were a lot of concerns about the school close by and some of the spatial impact that a larger roundabout would have that area. We will be able to fit a roundabout at Durston that more closely aligns with the other intersections along Durston as well, whereas many of the Babcock intersections are signalized. We're proposing a wide shared use path in at least one direction. And so all our projects follow our complete cities, complete streets policy. Multimodality is heavily important in all of our corridor projects. And so we'll have continuous protected shared use path on at least one side of the street at all times. And then finally, the last one is the big one. Again, we heard loud and clear that it was not going to be possible or prudent to just run this 5-lane corridor directly down a straight path. And so using that flexible design to use open space that's available to shift the road in and out, to primarily protect the ditch corridor, the open ditch that's there right now, and the trees. That's the big part that we hope you take out of our design as we present. And so take all of those into one. If you remember this graphic, this was our sort of conceptual plan at that pre-design phase. You'll see multiple lanes, straight down the Fowler corridor, wide impact. We took your responses and comments, and we laid out what this could look like in design. So we said 2-lane typical section using the existing streets where possible. Great idea, let's do it. If you put a signal in at that point instead of roundabout, also strong agree, let's go. Improve the existing trail. So one of the critical parts of this corridor is from Babcock up to Durston. We all know and heard loud and clear how much you value that tree corridor and existing trail. We will not be impacting that at all. The vast majority of those trees will remain. The only thing that we might do, if it's agreeable to the community, is improve that trail by paving it, hopefully allow it to be accessible for a little bit longer throughout the year. Then that also comes in a section where we'll shift the alignment. So again, we do not impact that ditch corridor and trees as much as possible. And then again, narrow that template up as we go towards oak. And so once again, we reduce the width of the impact. And the big one, maintain the open ditch. We agree. So does the ditch company. The ditch is going to be maintained open. All right, so that gets us to sort of our new sketch and our new map. We switch it around on you. Oak is at the top now, but essentially we took all the comments that we got in pre-design and the conceptual design that we had at that point, and we revised it to what we see now. So you'll see as we go along, in the next couple slides, we'll get down into more detail, but you'll see starting at the north at Oak, we do shift the alignment into some of the open space that exists, so that we do not have to pave over the ditch corridor there. That remains open. The trees remain intact. We have the roundabout at Thurston that then takes us through into the existing section of Fowler. We're going to build within curb to curb through that section, so it will not be widened at all. Parking will be maintained along the northbound side of the road for the residents that are there. And then once we get into a little bit more of open space, we'll use that opportunity to shift the roadway once again, to make sure that we can maintain the ditch open and impact as few trees as possible. Then at that point, we're back down onto the existing Fowler, south of Babcock as we come into Huffine. That section, once again, will be maintained roughly within the curb to curb width. On the northbound side, if you ever notice, we don't have any curb there at all. And so we will build that in. We'll get some stormwater management so we don't just sheet flow all the stormwater off into the ditch. And then we'll largely maintain that street as is. So one thing that we heard loud clear was this corridor must be contextually appropriate. One thing that we do to make it feel like a safer, calmer, more comfortable street is really use landscaping that, in engineering terms, friction to movement. And so if you pave this big wide stretch of street, it's going to feel like a big wide stretch of street. That's going to lead to folks maybe not paying attention to the speedometer quite as much as they should. And so we wanted to really show early on in the design the landscaping concepts that we hope to bring through to final. So a couple of the concepts here, we are using two forms of trees. So we have our typical street trees, which would go in what we call the boulevard of the street between the curb and the sidewalk. We're also going to be utilizing some hardier, larger trees we're terming as buffer trees. So the idea is that we're going to try to fit the road corridor within the space as with as little impact to the adjacent homeowners, adjacent homes as possible. So using topography, maybe taking some of the strippings that we have to take off in order to build the road, and create some topography or some swales and some mounds, and then planting trees around them. The goal is to keep the visual in terms of headlights and as much of the sound and noise impact as possible away from the adjacent homeowner. So we're going to use vegetation to do that, as well as within the medians and the boulevards. We do anticipate somewhere around 250 new trees to be planted as part of the project. All will use drip irrigation only to get the vegetation started. And so we'll use a term we call xeriscaping. So it's low water demand type plantings, natural plantings, to really fit in with the natural and existing environment. Also use as little water demand as possible. Once those trees have started and the plantings have started, we've found in the past that we can then turn off that drip in the summer, and they should be able to be maintained throughout their life. All right, so now we're going to do a bit of a segment to segment review. So we're going to start all the way up at the north part of the project. These are going to be a snapshot of what that section of future Fowler may look like. So each of these slides will generally have an aerial or plan view, as well as a section view underneath of it. So the section view sort of illustrates what the actual road might look like as you're driving, walking, or biking along it. The aerial view shows you from 10,000 feet what it might look like in plan. I want to go over some of the features for each segment as we go along. So starting at the north end, we will have space to be able to build wide shared use paths in both directions. So 10 feet wide. It will be allowed for walking and biking. It will go both north and south from Oak to Durston. We have proposed to include a landscape median in this section. Our typical 3-lane section does have a median to allow for the left turns. We do have space here. However, we will consider, if it's in the interest of the community, tightening that back up into 2 lanes, like some of the other sections as well. We do propose one full access point at Annie Street. So Annie would be proposed to connect from subdivision to the west or to the subdivision to the east. And this one we note, well, first of all, we will propose a roundabout for intersection control at Durston. And then we do note that this section does require some right-of-way to be purchased from the city. So the city does not generally use what's known as eminent domain. And so we are working with landowners along the corridor as we speak to come to agreeable terms so that we can respect their rights, property owners, and allow the project to move forward. And this is a bit of a blow-up view of that typical section of the road. So this would be looking northbound. Again, demonstrates one drive lane in each direction, landscape median in the middle to allow for left turns. And then we'll have what we call the boulevard space. Already received some comments that might be worth tightening those up to be a little bit narrower, something that we could very well investigate going into next phase of design. And then those are 10-foot multi-use, shared use. We kind of use those terms interchangeably, paths on either side. Okay, so coming back now towards our south one section to Durston and Babcock, this is where we get to have a lot of fun. And so this is one where the first view on the top is going to show that existing portion of Fowler. And the bottom view is going to show the one where no road exists today. So a couple key features along the segment. So here's where we run into some challenges. If we were to extend both directions of those shared use paths that we start out at Oak, it would require some pretty significant impacts, to the tree corridor and the home frontages along Fowler. That's something that we heard loud and clear was not wanted by the community. And so what we want to make sure we do here, though, is have continuous bicycle facility, both northbound and southbound. What we're going to do to try to thread that needle and not have as big of an environmental impact while still maintaining that is use on-street bike lanes in some portions to use the existing pavement we have in order to still allow you to continue north and south without necessarily having to go outside. So on that north section, we will maintain the street within the existing curb-to-curb width, so no widening at all in the existing part of Fowler there. Will be a 2-lane section through this full Durston and Babcock stretch. We will be protecting and improving the existing path that goes along the west side of the corridor there. That might look like repaving it through the section that exists as paved. And then again, if it's agreeable to the community, paving the section that exists as gravel and dirt right now in order to make it a little bit more accessible more times of the year. In this section, we do anticipate having about 27 additional street trees added into it, and then ending to the south at Babcock with a traffic signal, so not a roundabout. Generally speaking, we would expect to set a 30-mile-per-hour maximum speed limit for this corridor. So last year, we went through an exercise where we really created a new manner of setting speed limits for Bozeman. We heard that many streets were signed faster than a lot of folks expected or wanted. So we went through an engineering evaluation. We reduced speed on over 11 miles of street. And we are making more of a consistent speed limits between the different street types. So this as a minor arterial, all of our minor arterials are set 30 miles per hour maximum. One thing that we're not going to do though is increase speed limits in any sections where they're less than 30 right now. So if they're at 25 right now and they're working, we certainly aren't going to encourage faster speeds by raising the speed limit. Those are usually in the areas adjacent to homes and parks. No need to be going 5 miles per hour faster through there. And again, here's a section view. So this will, again, that if you can read it really fine print, that is the existing roadway width of Fowler as it comes south of Durston there. So that's the existing path on the left side, existing Fowler. What we'll do there is we'll take the existing space, maintain the parking in that northbound direction adjacent to the homes, straight in a 6-foot bike lane, which is a bit wider than our typical, and then be able to allow 2 lanes of traffic to flow from there. Then on the southern section, you'll note that we are preserving the existing tree and ditch corridor. The existing path, that's the left of that. We do propose to pave that. We hope that's seen as a positive thing for the community. And then run the street as a 2-lane corridor with that bike lane continuing north in the south. And that gets us down to our final section to the south. So at the top of the screen, this is, you'll see Babcock Street is the intersection at the left. That again, as a reminder, is proposed to be signalized, so no roundabout there. We heard concerns about the school next door, and even just the spatial impact that a larger roundabout would have that location. So we're able to save some more trees and reduce some of those tensions with roundabouts by going signalized here. We also note that many of the signals many of the intersections along Babcock are signalized instead of cutting. So a little bit of that consistency and continuity can be seen as a positive thing as well. Some key features here in this direction. Southbound parking will remain. So there park to the north. Ball fields, there will be parking maintained through that section, so folks have somewhere to park and don't end up in the neighborhoods. Here we will be proposing to stripe a bike lane in the southbound direction, again, to maintain continuity. However, in the northbound direction, we're going to utilize the existing path through the park, improve that, and then extend that northward. So there's, again, multimodal connectivity in both directions, but using as much of the existing features that we have as we can. In this section, we will not be proposing to widen the street much at all. Really, again, just putting that curb and gutter on the northbound side to control the stormwater. There will be some minor widening to add a turn lane going up to the intersection with Babcock, but that will be all that we expect to widen through this stretch. So once again, using the existing street as much as possible, reallocating, we call it in engineering terms, to street space to allow for parking on the southbound side, bike lane on the southbound side, 1 travel lane in both directions from there. What that looks like in section view. Again, this would be looking northbound. So if you're looking north from Huffine, in drive lane, 1 northbound, 1 southbound, southbound bike lane, southbound parking lane. Leave the boulevard, the trees, the existing sidewalk in the southbound direction as is, then improve the existing trail multi-use path going in the northbound direction. So this, again, the ditch corridor will remain open through the stretch, as will the trees remain. All right, so brass tacks. We are proposing to phase construction of the project in up to 4 phases. So starting south, we propose to begin construction from Oak to Durston in 2026, move on to middle section, Durston, Babcock in 2027, southern section in 2028, and then the intersection improvement at Huffine as the last project for it. The amounts, the dollar values that you see here, we'll try, hopefully not cancel here, but dollar values you see at the top are combined construction cost, design cost, and right-of-way cost. So you'll see one of the impacts that using more of that context-sensitive design is that we will require the road to have a greater amount of right-of-way. Probably not going to surprise anybody in telling you that land values in Bozeman are quite high these days. That means that our right-of-way expenses have increased significantly for this project as well. However, the good news So at the 30%, or excuse me, at the pre-design phase, we estimated a construction cost of about $17.5 million for the project. Based on a lot of the feedback that we heard, right-sizing the template, using existing streets we have, and taking one of the roundabouts out in favor of signal, we were able to cut almost $4 million off of the construction price, as we've seen year on year, 10+% construction cost escalations. So we're going to be able to not only preserve more of the existing corridor, but also save the project fairly cost as well. Okay, and with that, it's time for some questions and answers. So we did ask to at least start out by using the comment cards and question cards. Our idea there was to sort of combine like questions. Diane is going to start with asking some of those on your behalf. I'll do my best to answer. And then if we need a little bit more informality to that, we'll probably allow a little bit of time at the end for some hands to be raised.
I'm asking you.
Well, Diane, Joey Stassic, Senator Stewart, one question, sir.
I just wanted to ask, there's a few of us, and you already maybe clarify some extra little bit that might not get covered here. Okay. Would it be okay if I pass around just a assignment for people to get, to contact you?
Oh, absolutely. Okay. For the folks online, someone in the crowd offered to pass out a sign-up sheet for a group that is organizing to help us out with some comment on the project. I'll note as well, as we kind of leave here tonight, we're going to plan to do a bit of a public site walk. So I'll host anyone that's interested to take a walk, hear some of your concerns and go over what we hear tonight, and also some of the features of the project. That will be a public invitation. So anybody that's interested, we'll pick a nicer night than this, but sometime over the next month or so, we'll try to get together and do that. So the question was asked how we'll find out about that, how you can find out. If you are following along with the project, either on the Engage Bozeman site or any of the city social media, we'll make sure to have that public invitation.
And if you're part of FFC, the Friends of Fowler Connector, we'll send out too.
And if you're part of the Friends of Fowler Connector, you'll get invitations from that group this week. Joey.
All right. We're consolidating some of these, so we'll go through a list. There's people online too, so hopefully we'll hit everything by the end of it. First question, or a few questions.
You ask it into the mic, please. Thank you.
Of course. First question I have, consolidating a few things here. In terms of costs, there's a few questions about taxes going up, who's paying for the project, and timing of construction.
Okay, so questions about cost estimate and how the project is funded. Excuse me. So we are using two main sources of funding for this project. First and primarily are what are known as street impact fees. So the impact fees are what we collect from developers at the time that they pull building permits. They're assessed based on the traffic impact demand that they're expected to generate, and can only be used for what are called capacity expanding projects. So essentially the state says, okay, city, you're allowed to take those fees from the developer, but because you're taking them because of the traffic impacts that the development is causing, they have to be used to ease some of those impacts as well. And so a lot of development has happened on the west side of town, sending trips up and down, north, south, along what will be Fowler in the future. Right now, are either Ferguson, 19th, or a lot of your local streets. So all that development is paying for the majority of the project. Coupled with that is what is called our arterial and collector district. So that's an assessment to the property owner. That was established because the state says you can only use impact fees to build those capacity expanding portions of the street. So each project that we use impact fees on has a portion that would be the typical local street that the state says the city's got to go and build themselves. And so the minor portion of the cost will be from arterial and collector assessment district. The majority will come from impact fees. No property taxes. And I know that's a little bit contentious. We understand it's all the same check you guys write, whether it's an assessment fee or property tax, but no general fund property taxes will be going to pay for the project. Only the assessments for transportation and from development.
Next few questions are focused around street connections. So questions regarding, are all local street connections needed? Can some of those remain as is, not connecting to the new facility? There's a few questions about safe crossing for kids, crosswalks, specifically at Jennifer. And then there's kind of a follow-up group of questions regarding maybe traffic calming into the Ferguson Meadows with the Cascade connection.
Okay, great questions. We've heard that from a number of folks already. As we go into the next phase of the project, first of all, I'll start with our policy. We do very much, from a policy position, do encourage connected neighborhoods. For our neighborhoods to be connected, the streets have to be connected. Fowler is a minor arterial, so the intent is for this corridor to take the majority of north-south traffic from the neighborhoods in the area. For that to be successful, the local streets do have to be connected into it. We do, however, very much recognize that that causes a good bit of concern by folks who might be worried that people are going to use those new connections as cut-throughs. In the next phase of the project, what we're going to do is we're going to evaluate what we call those secondary impacts and look to come up with either traffic control, meaning maybe some more four-way stop signs, or traffic calming, such as curb extensions or traffic circles on the streets that are connecting to the future Fowler. Make sure any of that additional traffic demand is mitigated in your neighborhoods as well.
Great. I could probably answer this one a little easier. So there's a few questions about the middle section, which is south of Sanderson through Babcock. Questions regarding how many of the existing trees from our schematic shown here will remain. And similar questions about how much of the open ditch will remain. So from our estimates, we're looking at keeping 150 of the existing 200 trees through that middle section, in addition of adding 250 new trees. So that's what we're showing on the graphics today. And then in terms of the open ditch section, again, of that middle section of roadway, we're estimating about 400 feet of piping, and that's mostly at the connections between the intersections of Babcock and connecting to the north of the existing Fowler. That remains 850 feet of existing open ditch in that middle section. And that's trying to maximize as much as possible with the road grades and tapers. And then to the north section, we're looking to retain all of the ditch heading north. Nick, one question for you. You touched on annexation and a few of the properties and needed right away. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit further on the process, the timing, steps that have been completed to date?
Sure. So there are three main property owners, private property owners along the corridor that will need to come to agreeable terms with on right-of-way acquisition in order for the project to advance. We have been in discussions with them for the last 2 years, and those discussions for acquisition will continue. Hope everybody can respect that those are private conversations, so I can't necessarily share terms, but that we are in communication with all and will not be intending to use eminent domain, so taking any property, coming to fair market value agreements with all that have property that we need to build.
All right, there's a few questions here, and I heard a few questions at the start of the meeting on the poster boards regarding the north segment of between Oak and Sanderson, and where there's a lot more flexibility there with our cross section of roadway. So there's a few questions asking about options to remove multi-use path, to provide more buffers, looking at fencing to provide buffers, and then if anything has changed, what's the city's plan with the excess right away, park, natural habitat.
I'll try to take those one by one. We do intend to continue the shared use paths both directions for such stretch of the road. That stretch is where we hope to use some mounds or topography and trees, vegetation in place of fences in order to buffer the road from the neighborhoods adjacent to them. Again, though, that those are detailed final design type discussions that we'll continue having through 60 and 90% as well. As far as some of the open space at the far north end, the city owns The large parcel that's open right now, as you approach Oak, sort of in what would be the southeast corner of the new the existing roundabout intersection. City Commission has in the past instructed staff to investigate potential affordable housing options for that location. We have nothing in the works currently, but if the project would advance, I would expect that to be a conversation that's had in a more specific manner from there. So no commitments to date. However, open and transparent, that was one thing that was discussed at the pre-design phase, and those ideas continue to germinate, and we'll see.
Might get a quick point of clarification. You've talked about the paths being directional, but in what you're showing here on this section, a person could ride their bike in either direction on either side of the street, correct?
Yes, correct. So the question in the room was to just clarify our shared use paths. You can ride them, you can walk or ride them in either direction. I've been using northbound, southbound, just in terms of what side of the prevailing traffic is going. Apologize, I'll use east and west part of the corridor to hopefully use that. We have one traffic engineer.
Takami's got one for you.
We have one question online.
All right, thank you. Will the Huffine and Fowler improvement include reprogramming of the light for a protected left turn for Fowler southbound travel turning onto Huffine?
Excellent question. Little bit of insight. So we do project the Fowler intersection improvement at Huffine. Cost upwards of about $3 million. From my position representing you, the people of Bozeman, that's largely going towards mitigating traffic on Huffine. Huffine, you do not own as residents of the city of Bozeman. That's a state rep. I have some concerns over spending $3 million of city money to improve an intersection that's largely going to benefit traffic that will supposed to be mitigated by the state. So one thing that our analysis has shown is that that intersection currently warrants protected left turns. That will be my intent to try first before we find out whether or not we need to spend $3 million further upgrading the capacity. So once things get connected through, I'm going to do my best to work the city magic and get that signal reprogrammed first before we spend any real money.
All right, our next question. There's a few questions that are asking how this project plan ties into the sensitive lands that the nation recently adopted. In the report, it states there's crossover between the plans that will be added. And yeah, similar questions, trees and wildlife habitat been considered in the context of the sensitive lands.
Great question. We always try to strive to make sure all of our plans and projects are connected together and represent one another. So a lot of the features in terms of right sizing the roadway, keeping the ditch open as much as possible, preserving as many trees as possible, shifting the roadway off, those all speak to the goals of that sensitive lands. Again, mitigating as much of the environmental impact of development as possible, preserving as much of the natural existing trees, waterways. Those are all central tenets of that sensitive lands plan. We hope our 30% design does speak well to those goals, and are certainly open to any comments, suggestions of things that can be tweaked and made better to make sure that we're living by that plan that we made last year.
Switching topics here, there's a few questions about fire response times. Are there any concerns about the reduced lane size that will limit these times? Will the roundabout at Durston affect any sort of response times through that area?
Mm-hmm. Great question on emergency responses. That was one of the main reasons that we had for continuing the project in order to connect this corridor and greatly improve response times. We built a brand new fire station just north of Oak there on Davis. And so we do not have any concerns from our fire department about potential reduced response times if we go to that 2-lane section. The roundabouts will be designed with what we call the central apron to be mountable from those large trucks. And so they found that they don't have much issue getting through them. One of the benefits to having that turn lane is it gives somebody the opportunity to kind of get out of the main flow of travel. However, I'm not going to be a stickler on that. We don't expect 20,000 cars a day on this stretch of Fowler. And so we feel like those concerns can be mitigated.
All right, Nick, next question. There's a few questions regarding kind of just the environmental analysis and guidelines. So back in 2021, we had the commission meeting where there was some information brought up of a 2001 environmental analysis study that was done for this area. And can you talk a little bit more about the specific design guidelines that we're following to protect this? And maybe compounding on that question, are there any other city plans to have future dedicated green space on this west end?
Couple more questions. So again, similar to the response on the sensitive lands plan, using that context sensitive design to avoid as much of the impact to the tree corridor and the open channel ditch as possible is sort of our attempt to thread that needle of still being able to provide the transportation function while also trying to protect as much of the existing environment as is there right now. In terms of future corridors on the west side, I don't know that I personally am aware of any. One thing that we try to do as our subdivisions annex in and build, we try to align park space along waterways and ditch corridors. So similar to what is just east of the Fowler corridor up through West Winds, Harvest Creek, some of those subdivisions, taking an existing ditch corridor and building a linear park out of it. One of those is already starting to be built and a subdivision built out sort of along the Cottonwood corridor area. And that would be all I can share at this point that's known as far as what sort of linear open space type parks would be planned for the west side.
I think there's a few questions regarding lighting design along the corridor, ensuring light pollution is mitigated, and then some questions kind of about specifically the roundabout, park headlights, lighthouse effect, kind of shining in. Maybe touching on some of the design features there.
The question generally regarding streetlights, you probably have got more comments on streetlights since I got here 3 years ago than anything else. We have adopted new standards that sort of turn down the temperature a bit and also add shields for all of our streetlights, so they should be directed straight down, hopefully into your house as little as possible. Again, the other part of the question I heard was about headlight impacts at the roundabouts specifically. Again, our attention to detail as we get into final design is going to be really using topography and vegetation as much as possible to reduce some of that glare, some of that impact. Other options such as fencing could also be investigated as well. We'll just need to know really more at that final design level before I can share much more specifics. We have one follow-up question from the crowd.
I have a question that kind of piggybacks on that one. When I was noticing you talk about the boulevard trees versus the buffer trees, and you're doing 250 trees, have you any idea what percent of those might be evergreen versus deciduous? Because as we know, a lot of the year our trees do not have leaves on them.
Joey's a traffic engineer, but he is the project manager for the consultant. Might Joey have a response?
Yeah, I think at this stage, there's kind of all options on the table. Some of the graphics you've seen in the back they're not set in stone. We're just kind of trying to show a visual of the impact that a tree network can provide to a corridor. So I don't think anything's been decided at this point. More to come, I guess.
And I think the idea was those buffer trees would be more, my trees, right? Coniferous. So provide really more of that year-round buffer. Deciduous ones for typical street trees in the boulevard. Follow-up question.
Just to follow up on here, I live on the east side of Park Street, so this doesn't directly affect the except I'm here to support my neighbors on the west side. And they were very, very close to this new design. And I appreciate all the work you guys have done to use the right of way and all those sorts of things, but noise is going to be a big issue from our subdivision. I would encourage you guys to look at not just trees, but also understory noise reducing plants like junipers and service berries because they provide much, much better noise attenuation than trees do. And you should, include those, not, it should just be trees. It should be, kind of a buffer in depth for those folks who are directly affected.
For those online, comment in the crowd was around different types of plantings, vegetation that could be used to mitigate sound. Very well received, and that's something that we're very fine.
Got a couple more coming for you. A few questions are regarding kind of future expansion, both of the roadway width, will it be expanded to a larger facility in the future, and specifically looking at the Babcock signals that proposed to be a roundabout.
Not in any of our lifetimes, and hopefully none of our kids either. We don't expect, even in our most aggressive traffic projections, to require anywhere near the capacity that would be. So 2-lane street, so no turn lanes, we estimate can carry about 12,000 vehicles a day. It's far beyond what we project this section of Fowler to carry to begin with. We can carry up to 18,000 or so vehicles a day when we add in the turn lanes. So as cars turning left are blocking cars going straight. In order to really justify anything wider, bigger than that, you need to get into the 28,000 vehicles per day range. And none of our plans show any of our streets other than our main arterials, Huffine, Oak, 19th, Kagi, unfortunately, in the future, really carrying that much traffic. And so certainly not my interest, and none in the city's plans either, to widen the Fowler any wider than what's being proposed here. Nor would it be in our plans spending a couple $1 million to build a signal right now. We don't have all the money in the world to turn around and turn that into a roundabout either. So I can confidently say no additional expansion from what is presented.
I guess I had one more kind of crystal ball, big long-term future plan. Is there any master plan that calls for an interchange at I-90 that either connects to Davis, Ferguson, Cottonwood, that would kind of facilitate major growth along this corridor?
Long range topic there. We are not aware of any plans state transportation department has for additional interchanges along I-90 in the west part of Kent. We do now have a metropolitan planning organization between Bozeman, Belgrade County, and Streamline, our transit provider, as well as the state. Those sort of bigger regional type projects would be planned and managed by that organization. So the city itself, we certainly do not have any plans for additional interchanges and wouldn't expect this to need one.
All right, I've got one last one that I think I can answer the best with some things we pulled up here. So the question is regarding what's the expected ADT, or average daily traffic, that's expected to be seen on this facility in the future. So part of our pre-design effort is we outlined both existing traffic volumes and operations, as well as trying to model what the 20-year horizon. If those documents were reviewed by everybody here, sure daily, we looked at a few options. If it was a 5-lane facility, what would that hold for traffic? And also what is a 2/3-lane facility like we have proposed today? So based on all those numbers, connectivity, future growth, 20-year horizon, what we're estimating is in the range of 12,000 to 14,000 daily vehicles along Fowler in this section. To put that in context, Davis to the north of Oak is about 15,000 vehicles. So we're projecting fewer vehicles than to the north. Oak Street's about 15,000 vehicles, so kind of lower volume thresholds than those two facilities.
That's all future.
Future, right. 20-year future.
And one thing I'll add to that too, we're in a bit of an awkward time in long-range planning, and that a lot of the planning documents we have show a pretty wide planning boundary. And so when we then place our transportation plans and our water resource plans along them, they tend to show a lot more demand than we may have enough water rate to support. So even numbers such as that, really presuming that We did eventually, 20, 40 years from now, build out the edges of our planning boundary, but that's far from certain that we'll be able to do that. So I don't mean to try to mitigate some of those numbers. I know they are large and scary, but I would very much expect those to be worst case scenarios. One thing we see is per capita. So our individual travel is not increasing year on year. We spent decades as transportation engineers just presuming everybody's going to drive a little bit more every year. And what that's led to is us over-project a lot of traffic volume for streets. So what we do in the city is we only project volumes based on the known demand that's going to be generated from development when it comes in. If that demand ends up being less in the future, so will the trips, so will the traffic.
That's all we have. There was one question about slide. We've got 10 minutes.
Great. So I'm going to do my best to field some questions from the crowd. I'm going to call on somebody, ask your question. I'll try to restate it for the folks online and then answer it from there. So I did have one start and then we'll go.
I'm still confused about how this is getting paid for. A large percentage is getting paid by street impact fee. You said the remaining would be on the head of the property owner, just property.
I'm sorry. So the question was clarification on project funding. So just to make sure I didn't add any confusion, there will be no property owners along the corridor for project. Street impact fees are collected from developers at the time of development. Arterial and collector district assessments are ones that every property owner in Bozeman pays. And so that's a small assessment fee that goes towards our arterial and collector roadway network to expand and improve it. That would fill, we estimate about 40% of the project cost.
So that's spread across all the citizens.
Spread across all citizens of Bozeman.
What would that price be, like for $100,000 home that
So I would have to unfortunately direct you to your assessment bill. If you didn't pay it all in full, you were reminded last week to pay up by the end of May in that vote as well. It would be found along there as well. That discussion would also be held at our annual operating budget sessions with the commission. Those will start in June, be adopted by July 1 for next year. I think we had one in the gray and then we'll go around.
I wrote down that question about the slide. Can I show you what slide that I wanted to see again? So 30% design review.
Okay. There was a request to go over one of the slides once more, and we're going to try to go to that. All right. I believe it was this one, ma'am? Yeah. Okay.
Can I just ask a question about this space right here? Is that going to stay and is that trails?
So the question was about the parts of land as you approach Babcock to the east of the future Fowler Corridor. So that is one of our private landowners. I certainly don't control their interests in their land and won't speak to them either. So that the city would not have really any impact or discretion over what they do in the future. One here and then one here.
I heard you talk about protecting as many trees as possible. I heard you use the term buffer trees, but I think you're using that term differently than the question I have about buffers. So I didn't hear you say along the existing riparian forest, what size buffer are you using beyond that? Typically, I think when we talk about trying to protect riparian areas, reduce pollution runoff, try to protect some of that habitat function, ecological function, we're talking about 50-foot buffer beyond the edge of the tree, and I'm not sure if I saw any slides that do that. So can you speak a little bit more to that? And then leading to the question about design guidelines, are you guys using design guidelines to help you determine those appropriate buffer zones? And then just follow up is, do you have the ecological experts on your team to help inform those types of discussions? You know a lot about the engineering and all of that, but real specific
expertise in the area of ecological protection? Because we know it's not enough to keep the tree standing. There needs to be some work. Thanks.
Two-part question. I'm going to do my best to restate first. The first part of the question was about buffers along the ditch corridor, along the waterway corridor to the actual road itself. So we are following City Bozeman development standards. Joey, I believe 30-foot minimum from top of bank.
That's what the blue box is.
Blue box. So yeah, I believe 30-foot minimum
Really
off from the ditch corridor itself. That's the minimum. Edge of bank. Yeah, edge of bank.
Bank,
Yes.
off the edge of the tree.
That's correct. That's correct. So that was, again, one of those, I'll call it trade-off between additional land needed and cost needed right away for the project, and buffering and maintaining as many of the trees as possible. The second follow-up was whether or not the design team or the project team has an ecological expert on the team. We did have a specialized sub-consultant on board at the pre-design phase to do our environmental analysis. We can certainly re-engage with them if there's additional concern from the community about how we might be able to use them as we kind of get into the details of that as well.
Yeah, and I appreciate that you have referred to that there's no person endangered or not doing that. There's still value to what exists.
Okay. Question?
Can you review the dates, please, for each of the phases?
Sure. So the question was asked to review dates of phases. Let me try to find that. So I don't have dates on this slide, but phase one, the north section from Oak to Sanderson, we would expect right now plan to go to construction in 2026. The middle section, phase two from Sanderson and Babcock in 2027. The south section from Babcock to Huffine in 2028. And then if we do have to spend some money doing the intersection, do that the following year. And all those dates and timelines are dependent upon design, right-of-way acquisition, and permitting. So that's our goal right now. That's where it's at in our capital plan, all subject to change.
Right. Discuss fiscal year versus.
I was using calendar. Here and then.
I have a question on snow removal. Where are you going to put the snow?
Sure. So one of the functions of our boulevard space, that grass strip, is snow storage. And so we'll have minimum, I believe, 7-foot boulevard strips in all directions. We estimate one clear in one lane needs about minimum 5-foot boulevard. 7 gives us a little bit of buffer. So primary snow storage would be in the boulevard areas. We do tend to have to, at least in big snow years, not so much this year, but do a little bit of hauling around intersections where you run out of space adjacent to the road.
And one more thing, I live to the west side, and I'm really concerned about those trees. We have all kinds of birds and things that live there. So 30 feet doesn't seem like enough.
Okay. Appreciate the compliment.
Well, time for one more and we'll close.
Allison, one more question.
So this is a good slide to ask this question. I think I heard you mention we've had 10% construction inflation costs over the last few years. Are you budgeting for similar inflation in this?
Yeah, the question was whether or not city staff budgets additional construction escalation into our cost estimates in future years. And yes, we do that. Well, unfortunately, or fortunately. So we try to leave ourselves a little bit of buffer. At this stage of design, we also have a 15% contingency on all of our cost estimates as well. So we hope that eats up some of the unanticipated cost escalation, as well as some of the other project details that really only become known once you get further into design. One more, Joey. One more. Here.
Regarding secondary street connections, like Annie Street or Cascade, those are going to impact those riparian areas and the trees, and that's where you're going to have to do the piping. So we're losing the open ditch. There's the environmental impact, and there's also the impact to those streets And I do understand you want to have really good connectivity. We're not talking about a really great distance between Durston and so with those secondary streets, I've already heard on social media, people in Valley West, for example, saying, great, we're going to take Cascade to get to the Fowler connection because the school zone at Highlight on that plot is really just being 50 miles an hour is too slow. So we are going to have impact on these neighborhoods, and there are a lot of school kids walking. So mitigations to keep the speeds down, to keep the traffic down, and even just considering not connecting some of those streets where they impact the riparian.
So last question was a reiteration of maybe to look at particularly some of the side street connections that do cross the ditch border and the impacts of those trees. And we can certainly commit to looking into that before we get out to 60% design. Good thing maybe to take a look at when we do our second. Okay, so we're going to try to respect the time of the folks online and cut questions there. I'm going to check one more time to make sure we have nothing. Okay. I'm going to hang around a little bit in the back to answer any more questions that you might have. That is the end of our formal session tonight. Thank you guys so much for coming and participating. Diane has one more parting comment.
Yes, I just want to let everybody know that all of these boards and all of the plans are on the project website. You can find them there. There's a question and answer session online as well. You can ask more questions. You can reach out to any one of us. Our contact information is on the website. So use it. We're here. But thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Aaron.
Really a helpful forum.
Yes, thank you.